Hi, everyone. I'm Colette Dollarhide. I am really excited to be a part of this event this evening. This year, I've got the honor of working, excuse me, with these tremendous leaders in social justice, and so I'm really excited that we get to talk tonight about social justice in the schools. And here we go. So I recognize that sometimes PowerPoints can be a little distracting. I don't read PowerPoints. I use them as just an opportunity to kind of remember what it is I wanted to share with you. But we are going to post the PowerPoint on the website so that you'll be able to have it if there's material on it that you would like. I have the honor of serving as the president of CSJ. My role or my point, my goal in that capacity is to serve the people who are serving our clients. So the organization is geared to providing information and connection among people who have a passion for social justice, who understand how important this topic is, who feel called to be able to serve others and serve other communities in this way. I'm also a counselor educator. I'm a professor, and I serve as our program chair plus the associate chair of our department at The Ohio State University. And my email address is down here at the bottom. It's dollarhide.one. Yes, that is a real name. If you have any questions or any follow-up things after this webinar that you would like to follow up with me, please feel free to contact me. I am interested in hearing about who you are. And so there's a poll that we wanted to ask you to take really briefly to find out who all of you are. So if you would indicate in what setting you're serving, it helps us to understand who is coming to our webinars, and it helps me to understand sort of a little bit of perhaps how to frame some of what I'm going to share with you. Okay, a number of you are students. Half of you, it looks like, are still counselors in training, which is very exciting. I'm very glad that you're here. We have a few folks at the elementary level, the 3 or 4 folks at the middle school level, 7 at the high school level, a couple of counseling directors, and then a couple of counselor educators. So thank you for that. Thank you for kind of giving us a sense of who you are so that I can, hopefully frame my comments in a meaningful way for all of you. So a couple of things about some resources. There are a ton of excellent materials out there, and this is by no means a finite list. This is just the beginning of some reading suggestions that might help you as you're thinking about your own social justice work and your own what work that you want to do on yourself and your own thinking. So these are all excellent resources. In particular, Atkins and Oglesby is one that is specific to school counseling. Oh, great. Okay, there it is. So this book, Interrupting Racism, is an excellent resource full of lots of practical suggestions and ideas. One of the things that I think is important is to have an understanding, a common understanding of what social justice is. And for some reason, my screen is not advancing. Maybe I'll do this. That did it. Okay. So the definition that I'm going to be using this evening is that social justice is social effort to create equity so that all persons have equal access to opportunities and resources that historically have been reserved for those in privileged life spaces. And the reason that some of these words are highlighted in red is that the important thing about social justice is to remember its effort. It is not sitting and thinking about it. It's not reading about it. It's doing something with what you have discovered about yourself and about the world around you in order to ensure that everyone has the same access to the important opportunities and resources that we believe are our schools are designed to provide. The irony is, though, that our schools are inherently racially structured institutions. They have been designed to replicate white privilege in a variety of different ways, in terms of the customs, in terms of the structure, in terms of the philosophy that undergirds the educational endeavor, and that is that there is an expert, kind of like what I'm doing to you guys right now, right? There's an expert who has information, and the people who are in the learning role don't have an opportunity to interact or engage. And it's because we don't believe that students have anything of value to offer to the learning process, which is unfortunate. A further way that education K to 20, all the way through our universities, perpetuates social injustice is with the reliance on the Greco-Roman traditions of critical thinking and objective knowing, and distancing oneself from knowledge in order to appear objective, which we all know is an illusion anyway. But you take all of these characteristics together and you apply them down to from kindergarten all the way through college level learning, and it's pretty clear that we've got structures that are inherently white focused, white biased, middle class, male oriented, as opposed to being culturally informed, gender informed, diverse, identity informed. It's all very narrowly designed to create cogs in the industrial economic machine that runs our country. So there are things that we need to recognize about the learning environment in order to understand where social justice fits, how it fits, how we can practice social justice in a meaningful way in all of the work that we do in the schools. I picked this picture and wanted to just, just share it with you, because this is when I Googled education, because I was looking for some images, and this is what came up, and what you see is exactly what I was just talking about. You see individuals who are all white, the white hegemonic image of education. This young man is I'm assuming this is a boy, but this student is concentrating in a solo endeavor, trying to take a test or write answers or whatever. There's no one else that he's engaging with. I mean, it just kind of highlights that our educational system is a racist and gendered endeavor. So what I'm going to suggest is that in order to organize your thinking about what social justice means in the schools, I'm going to propose this 5-step diagram as a means of kind of organizing what is it that, how do you engage in social justice in the schools? And the important activities are listen, examine, educate, challenge, and change. And it works in 2 different ways. It works in an external context and it works in an internal context. So looking at the external context first, listening has to do with listening to diverse communities and parents, not just assuming that you know what is right for all kids. This is part of the danger of the education that we have, is that we go, well, I'm an expert, I have a master's degree or I have a doctoral degree. And so that expert status means that I have the understanding of what you need, whether you know it or not. And that's a slippery slope, trust me. That is not an appropriate way to approach social justice work. You are a servant relative to the communities that you serve. This is not, hey, I know exactly what to do, I know how to do this. You're a servant. That service orientation is what keeps you humble. It keeps you focusing on cultural humility, and it keeps you listening. And that's an important, absolutely critical first step. The second step is to examining practices, policies, and programs. It's understanding how insidious racism is, that it has designed a system that has worked for the privileged part of our society. And because of that, we just accept it as a given instead of examining it closely. Once you've found examples, and trust me, you will, of practices, policies, and programs that are riddled with bias, then you need to educate your colleagues. And this is where your role as a school counselor is so critical, because you're inside the system, but you're also outside the system. And the teachers and administrators know this. I've heard, you know, in the research that I've done about schools and about school counselors in our schools, one principal said it really well. She said that her principal was, her counselor was the mortar between the bricks that held the school together. So school professionals understand the role of the school counselor as a critical person who stands between all of these different elements and can translate across. This gives you tremendous flexibility so that you do have opportunities for conversations in which to educate our colleagues about what it is our diverse communities need and what they've told you that they need. And then we challenge. And that challenge can be overt, it can be covert, it can be as subtle, or it can be as direct as you find called to enact in that moment. But it's so important that we do not just go along to get along. We don't just fake it till we make it, right? We have to have the fortitude to stand up. We're not a bystander anymore. We cannot stand by and watch our children from all of our communities suffer racial trauma and the stress of constantly being using, you know, having adults call kids names and going in teacher's lounge. Sometimes you'll hear the most atrocious things that people say about the kids in their classes. We cannot stand by and let that go unchallenged. And then finally, change. So we identify what it is, what the change is that needs to be done. We don't just say this is wrong. We say here's the right way to do it. We don't just say this is bad. We need to stop this. We also have a solution. We have the suggestion. We have the answer. We have what the fix is going to look like. And in order to advocate for that change, we do the things that we need to do. If that involves, you know, writing letters, if that involves partnering with parents, that involves going to the school board, if that involves going to the principal with concerns about colleagues who are overtly racist in the classroom, we have to stand up for the right thing. It's also an internal process. And this is the work that I would suggest that you do to prepare for that external work. So the listening means being open to learning, being open to being taught, to hearing what it is that our diverse communities tell us that they need, examining ourselves for biases, educating ourselves about racist structures, about the way that we oppress others, and about the way we have colluded with colonialism. And we all have. And we need to admit honestly acknowledge, confront that, and understand that it's up to us then to make things better in our schools. We have to challenge ourselves. We can't just say, well, now I've read the books, I know everything there is to know. No, this is a lifelong process. It's a lifelong recovery process for white people to constantly examine the ways that racist messages have been embedded in our consciousness and subconscious. And we need to constantly be on guard against making decisions and acting on those things. And then we need to change ourselves. We need to recognize where we're limited and change the things about ourselves that contribute to the racist behaviors within our organizations and institutions. So when we've done that work, when we've started that process of thinking about what it is that we're doing that contributes to the racist environment in which our children are educated, that's when we need to recognize what we can do to start the journey. So the journey would start with doing an equity audit. It would start with the ability to understand what is it that kids and families are experiencing in my school, and what is it that they're not saying? What is it that they're not able to say about the experience that their child is having in our schools and in our school districts? Specifically, do they feel safe, included, involved, welcomed, valued, celebrated? I have 4 grandchildren, and I have a racially blended family, and in the building that my grandchildren, the elementary school, there's a sign that says, "Go where you're celebrated, not tolerated." And I love that. And I love the principal. I've spoken with her about that sign on many times, because that is important message for our families and our children to not just know, but to feel that they are welcome, they're celebrated. And I'm not talking about Black History Month. I'm talking about a year-round celebration of all of the children in our schools, not just the ones that conform to the perfect attendance, the perfect behavior, walking in straight lines and not talking, not touching, not laughing, not running, all of those things that children are told, don't. So I know there are some issues about sometimes parents don't feel comfortable sharing, but you'd be thinking, as you're doing this equity audit, think about how do you protect their confidentiality of both the students and the families that you are having these conversations with. To what extent is your administration supportive of your work toward creating a more equitable and just environment within your building and your district? How formal or informal do you think that these structures, this audit ought to be? And then do you go into their homes, or do you invite them to the school? If you invite them to the school, thinking about many of our families are severely stressed right now, and so the idea of going into the school may not be comfortable based on the pandemic. So how do you reach out and create that sense of inclusion if you're not able to be face-to-face with your students and your families? So how do you actually do, what does social justice in the schools look like, right? We've talked about the foundation, we've talked about kind of an overall model, but what does it actually look like? Well, the easiest way for me to share with you some ideas of what it might look like is to take a few moments and take a look at systems theory. I know that we are all aware that these children that we're working with are in a school environment. And so sometimes, you know, we're more aware than some of our colleagues might be, because our students, our clients are embedded within a school system. And yet, how far outside of the student do we look when we're thinking about social justice? Well, the ecological systems, systems theory talks about how important it is to recognize that within each child, there's an inner system, the self. There is this immediate system of siblings, parents, the peers, the classroom environment. There's the neighborhood within which the student might have friends, playmates, etc. And then I recognize that this the term here is religious. It's interesting that that's the one setting, but it could be any you know, it could be a neighborhood YMCA, or the library. Those kinds of things might be if the child engages in that on a weekly, daily, constant basis. It could be one of the microsystems, the immediate system. There is also an extended system. In the school context, what we're going to talk about is the building, the school building, the school district. It could also, you know, then these external systems may also include, I don't know, something like, you know, service providers that come into the building, for example, that offer services for students. And then there is the community system, and the community system is, you know, the school board. It is the city government, it's employers, it might be mentors in the community. So recognizing that surrounding every student are these layers of influence, and the layers of influence, you can barely see it in this lighter shaded here. These exert pressure down and pressure back out. At the same time, they influence each other. So this is a very complex way of looking at systems around it, surrounding each child in our schools, and yet social justice is recognizing where each of these systems constitutes a point of intervention, a point of social justice action, so that it's awareness that that there are multiple ways that children might feel oppressed and multiple ways that children could benefit from being empowered. So we're going to take each one of those systems and then take a look at what would it actually look like to practice social justice relative to each one of these systems. So the inner system, remember, is the child's self and your self. So it's a reminder when we're talking about the systemic issues that are internal. We internalize a lot of the messages from advertising, books, movies, social media, all of those influences, ways that we get information about the world. We internalize those messages. And the younger we are, the sort of the deeper those messages go. And so, you know, it's a reminder again that we have to do our own racial work. We have to recognize our own racism and our own privilege. Simply by light of our education, we are privileged. By light of our social status as a professional school counselor, we are privileged. Some of us are privileged by skin and racial cultural identity. Those layers of privilege need to be acknowledged, and you need to understand how can you use that privilege in the service of oppressed communities and minoritized communities. Adopting an anti-racist identity is an important step here also. What this involves is recognizing that not everyone is going to agree with you. Not everyone is going to understand the issues the way that you do, that there will be pushback, and that sometimes there are costs associated with being identified as a social justice anti-racist school counselor. One of the presentations I was privileged to participate in recently, one of my Black colleagues said, if you're not willing to give something up, then you're not a social justice worker. And I thought about that. I really think that that's a very, very important point. You've got to be willing to give something up. And if that means that you give up, you know, that sense that everybody likes you or that sense that everybody approves of you, you know, those are small prices, small costs that are, you know, that are more than worth the price of being a social justice advocate. To have that as a part of your identity, in my opinion, is to join with the ranks of John Lewis and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It's a higher calling than just getting along. And sometimes that means going to battle with bigger systems and bigger people, and with the concern about, you know, will I be employed? Honestly, if you lose a position because someone believes that you're too active as a social justice advocate, then you don't want to be there anyway. And it's unfortunate that there's, you know, if you can stay inside the system, that's the best place to make change. But if it's something that you need to call attention to from the outside and advocate for change, then that may be what you need to do. Another example is policing in the schools. I know that there are a lot of really important efforts going on right now to make schools recognize that police officers who are not trained in de-escalating situations. We've seen some horrendous examples of police officers slamming young people to the floor on their heads. There's no reason for that. There is absolutely no reason for that. It's appalling. So if we have people in our schools who are carrying guns, who have no training in de-escalating a situation and revert to violence themselves, then there's a problem. And the schools need to be aware of that and need to start thinking about whether or not that's an appropriate way to help students understand how to get along better in their school environment. There are a number of other initiatives that can be every bit, incredibly effective to help students maintain the community. Restorative justice is a particularly important program, skill, response set that gives children and young people an opportunity to think about how do they restore the community, the sense of community within their classroom and with their classmates. Much more useful and important way of helping kids reconnect after that community has been fractured through some behavior that that they regret. So just thinking about different ways of looking at, you know, how we police behavior, and I use the word police very deliberately in that context. So we can help our students also in terms of their inner systems, help them examine their racial learning. What are the messages that they've internalized? Excuse me. You know, being at a football school, I was at another football school. I won't name the football school, but there were two little kids in a grocery store, and their moms were with them, and they passed each other in the grocery store, and these were like 4-year-old kids, one wearing the t-shirt of one school and the other wearing a t-shirt of the other school, and those kids yelled at each other and their parents egged it on. You know, oh, your school is stupid. I mean, these were 4-year-old kids. And I just was, it was a moment of, holy cow, what is it that we're teaching kids about how to be a member of a community when, you know, it just seemed such a perfect analogy for what happens with racial learning and how frequently parents teach kids, you know, how to see other racial groups. How do we help them to make different decisions? How do we help them to acknowledge and honor their own identities and acknowledge and honor the identities of other children in the building? Teaching kids directly about privilege, oppression, inclusion, respect. These concepts are incredibly important. And there are a number of excellent materials. Oops, sorry. I scrolled with my finger on the mouse instead of just pointing with the pointer. But these materials are can be very helpful. Teaching tolerance, you can just Google that. And it has wonderful resources on addressing racism in schools. The concept of tolerance, I wish it was, but it started years ago when tolerance was the term that was used in the day. But it's not just tolerance, it teaches direct inclusion, and the materials are wonderful. Now we're looking at the immediate system. So this is the system for peers, families, classrooms. This can rise to the level of relationships within the buildings, but we'll see building also in the next category. So there are a number of things that you can do that can address racist structures that exist within a child's immediate system, within the classroom, within peer groups, with teachers, with working with our families, partnering with our families. So a couple of things that you can do. You can think about ways that you are using bullying lessons, lessons about inclusion, and think about ways that those lessons can be beefed up so that they are about equity and about racial equity specifically. I have one of my doc students is an excellent practitioner, and she designed a class for grades 7 and 8 called Social Justice Development. And I'm just going to share the description with you really quickly. Students will explore power and privilege in diverse populations, contemporary and historical examples of oppression specifically related to African American history, as well as personal prejudices and biases. This course will support students in gaining an understanding of African American studies from the socio-political perspective. Students will develop skills to be advocates and allies for social justice. This course will be taught project-based learning, open discussion, mentorship, linking, and there are groups. There will be groups that will spring off of this class that will address the needs of African American students as well as Latinx students, because there are a number, both those populations are present in significant proportions in the school, and they have nothing that addresses their cultural pride and their cultural learning. So they're going to start with African American history, and then they're going to include one for Latinx history also, which is an example of how exciting it is when kids get a chance to learn these topics, you know, at early ages. Take a look at the punishment and reward system and look at whether or not those are biased. We know the school to prison pipeline is real. We know that when prison systems are privatized, there is an incentive, a direct economic incentive to jail and keep, incarcerate and keep as many people as possible in pseudo-slavery. If you're curious about this, you can read The New Jim Crow, and you can watch some of the, you know, the 1619 project as well as 13th, and challenge these. If your statistics are that, you know, a greater percentage of your Black and brown boys are being funneled into expulsion and exclusionary practices, there's a problem. There is a problem. And that is something that we need to address. I already mentioned celebrating students' cultures all year, not just a month out of the year, but our students should hear about African American engineers and thinkers and philosophers and authors and Latinx and women and all of these different identities, not just dead white guys. We've got to expand our students' awareness of all of the brilliance that comes in all colors, not just, you know, not just white, not just Caucasian. Examine other structures, other policies for bias, and then challenge and change them. So not just punishment and rewards, but looking at who gets recognition, who gets you know, the scholarships, who gets you know, are Black students only celebrated for the football field? Or are they only celebrated, you know, one time out of the year? Or do you have in your schools direct ways to recognize and exalt all of your students and the brilliance that they bring into your school? And then I would argue that all of us, and I'm including myself in this because I am also in recovery, always will be, all of us need training. We need reminding. We need our eyes open, because once your eyes are open, you can never close them again. We all need the opportunity to examine these issues, to talk about them, to personalize them, to feel bad about it, and then to get up the next day and do better. We all need this. And so you're going to see this again and again on these slides. One of the issues that Muhammad Khalil, in his book about culturally responsive administration, talks about the problems when teachers lower their expectations just to pass kids through. It's important that all students are lifted up, not just the kids who are going to college. Highlight their strengths, not their deficits. We have got to get rid of deficit language. The whole idea of at risk, the whole idea of the achievement gap. That achievement gap is because we've set some standard of measurement that is racist, pure and simple. So there is no such thing as an achievement gap. We have a teaching gap. We have a discipline gap. We have a problem with the way that we have problematized our students. That's not their problem, that's ours. That's ours to fix. We have to believe in our students and believe them. So when they talk about the racist behavior that's been directed toward them, we need to listen. I did a study where I interviewed school counselors to find out what their racial experiences were in their schools. And every single one of those respondents talked about racial language from their students, racial language from parents, racial language from teachers. That is unacceptable, unacceptable. We also need to be aware that racial trauma is real. Racial stress is real. And that the students in our schools who don't feel that they belong, who don't feel that anyone believes in them, and that don't feel that there is anyone on their side, they're experiencing trauma. And how much are we colluding in that? How much are we allowing that to happen instead of standing up for our students? And then helping, I know that many schools have, oh, we're trauma informed, that's great. But what they're thinking about are the adverse childhood experiences and not thinking about racial trauma. The original research on adverse childhood experiences was done in the context of racial realities, and that's been whitewashed. That data has been lost, and that is wrong. So racial trauma is a real traumatic experience. And so that needs to be infused into these discussions about trauma-informed education. There is also, our role also extends into the students' extended systems. So this can be the building, depending upon your reach and your scope as a practitioner. Excuse me, or it can be a part of conversations about district policies, district practices. Supporting diverse families when they need to confront something that the district is doing, like redistricting. I'm sorry, I'm not speaking well this evening. But when school boundaries are drawn, what is the impact of those school boundaries? Is that just to further segregate our buildings, our schools, to separate pockets of socioeconomic need or racial groups into enclaves that create racially homogeneous schooling patterns? That needs to be challenged. Okay. I get really wound up about school funding when school funding is differentially applied, and we know that in one district $1,000 is dedicated for each student, and in the neighboring district it's like $20. So $1,000, and then the neighboring district is $20 per student. I can't believe we tolerate it. I can't believe we tolerate it. So we need to advocate for our students to have equal amount of funding for every building. Every child is worth the same support in an educational context. And then creating adult support groups. There may be opportunities for you to create, and I've seen it done, I've seen school counselors do it, creating support groups for parents, for example, who are experiencing unemployment, creating a Black Lives Matter support group, an LGBT support group, a Latinx family support group, whatever it is, whoever is in your district, those parents might benefit from having the ability to connect with other parents. And it's not just your PTA. Don't assume it's your PTA, because in many schools, it's the white affluent parents who take over PTAs. So that structure strikes me as a little racist, to say the least. And the creating safe spaces, one of the things for our racially diverse families, one of the things that because I do anti-racial training and I teach social justice in my university, a lot of times white people talk about, I need a safe space. No, we need brave spaces for white people to confront their racism. And then we need safe spaces for our racially diverse students, families, faculty, and staff. We need our diverse communities to feel safe in all of their environments. And that's it's going to be a work in progress. It's not something that we're just going to go, okay, I did that, now we're done. No, it is an ongoing process, and you have to be dedicated, you have to be aware, and you have to be committed to making that change happen, and then monitoring to make sure that there are not other ways that racially biased practices are not being you know, slipped under the rug, slipped under the door. Finally, in our community systems, again, looking for any bias that you encounter, and this can be even in a daily interaction. It can even be in an adult interaction. I was in a jewelry store looking at jewelry, and there was a couple, black couple, standing, you know, just a couple of feet from me, and the salesperson came to me. And I said, no, they were here first. Oh, no, I think they're just looking. I said, no, they were here first. And I made ready, like I took my purse, I was going to leave, because it really made me angry. That's the kind of, that, I mean, I'm not saying that that's a perfect, you know, solution, but what I am saying is that wherever you see it, you need to address it. So that also is in our communities. And then bringing all of these communities into partnership with our schools, whether that's at a district level, whether that's, you know, in terms of, you know, coming and doing career fairs, or coming in and mentoring. We need to partner with and nurture and then maintain meaningful relationships with institutions, organizations that represent diverse communities, such as, you know, for Black fraternities, such as Black pastors, you know, just as some examples. I'm sorry, I should have said sororities and fraternities. It starts with listening. It starts with, you know, making contact, helping our diverse communities to understand that, you know, we are not a white knight, that we are an ally. I've heard the terms, you know, some people object to the term ally. Some people prefer co-conspirator, co-disruptor. But the point is that you're not there to fix, you're not there to tell them what they need to be more like you. You're there to celebrate who they are and to support who they are and what their children need. We need organizational advocacy. So we're advocating for our schools. We're advocating for our students in our schools. We need to get involved in legislative advocacy. As I mentioned, the whole issue of school funding. School boards are political bodies. They are political. And so being active with our school board and other school boards. I've gone to the State House to be a part of legislative advocacy. I've also testified on behalf of bills that would benefit our students in our schools. And we need to make our voices heard. So make sure that you are in you're ready, you stand ready to stand up for what's right for all of our communities. And then, you know, if that includes political action, direct political action in terms of voting, then we need to make it's important that we make those opinions and commitments known also in terms of how we vote. So I would like each one of us to think about what it is that we are doing, that we're right on the eve of a new school year. And I know that this school year is full of lots of questions. It's questions about health, questions about access. I understand that right now, those life and death kinds of questions may seem to take priority. I understand that. But no matter how you are going to practice this coming year as a school counselor, you need to ask yourself, who are you and who do you want to be in your school? What is it that you want to leave behind? Do you want to leave your school behind, or leave your school a better place, leave your students, or help your students access their maximum potential? Or do you want to be safe? Do you want to be quiet? Do you want to be the good counselor that everybody loves? Because you can't have both. And if you're going to be the right kind of school counselor that's going to stand up for your students, then you need to make that commitment now. Make it now. Plan now. Think now about what is this school year going to look like for you and for your students? Is this the turning of a page for you so that you now have the tools, you've got some ideas, you've got some direction, some things that you think, I can do this, I can make an impact, I can have an impact every day in the lives of my students? Because you want to leave that school better than you found it. You want to let those kids, lift those kids up in ways that they've never experienced before, in ways that they know that you believe in them deep in your core and deep in your heart. And so one of the things that I would ask you to do before we get to our questions is I'd like you to put in the chat something that you would like to do, you're going to do this coming year, something concrete that you're going to do this year to start this process that involves action. And so just feel free to put that in the chat, and I'll give you guys a few minutes to think about something and type that in. It's also an opportunity for you to see the names of maybe some people you know who might also be on this webinar. I hope you're putting wonderful and exciting things in the chat. I hope you're seeing what's in the chat and being inspired. Okay. We have about 10 minutes left, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that people might have. I don't know if you want to put your questions in the chat or if you have been all along. But if you have, any thoughts or anything that you would like to share. The comments are very, very inspirational, very inspired, very passionate. I love that.
I would love to share these on our website as well. These are great ideas.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. If I may, one of the questions, how does one tackle institutional racism in graduate work? I tell you, that is a whole ball of wax, because they're a whole bundle of tangled web. That is a very important question. I've worked at 5 different universities, and there is a problem in counselor ed. There is a problem in higher education that is not well examined. So we need to turn that critical lens inward and also take a look at what we're doing.
Dr. Darler-Hyde, I'm seeing some questions around how do you handle administration who is not supportive of anti-racist and other types of training? as well as a boss who is openly racist and discourages the work?
I think it depends on how, how much are you willing to risk, recognizing that what I'm going to say does involve risk, but for every boss, there is a boss's boss. And so for every faculty person, there is a dean. For every principal, there is a school board, there is a superintendent. If there's a superintendent that's racist, then that goes to the public. I mean, we need to hold people accountable. We need to make systems accountable for the ways that individuals act within that system. And it's not okay that a person can get away with it and say, well, I didn't mean it. I was just joking. Whatever the excuse is. No, that's not okay. That is not okay. So I recognize that it might seem simplistic, and I recognize that there is risk, but I think escalating the conversation to hold people accountable at all levels, I think that's what we need to do.
Dr. Dollarhide, could you speak to how we gain people power and momentum so that we're not the lone person fighting the fight at our schools?
That is a really good point, and I'm glad that you brought it up. I think it's important for every school counselor to build a cadre of like-minded professionals, and it may take a while to find them. And it may be, first, who supports the school counseling program, and then after that, who within that support system for the school counseling program understands anti-racism and understands how important it is to maintain an anti-racist environment for all of our students to thrive. Finding those individuals and partnering with them means that you're not the Lone Ranger, you're not the only one, crying wolf, but there are multiple others who, from a similar perspective of anti-racism, see what's happening in the school and can call it out. I think that's very, very important. Thank you for bringing up that. That is a huge step, I think, huge piece of this. What other questions do people have? I haven't been able to read all of the questions. Someone asks, what leadership traits and skills do you feel are particularly necessary to commit to social justice work in the schools? Dontavius, I hope, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. It's a wonderful question. I think that there are important leadership qualities that people need to tap. Some of those things have to do with recognizing that once you are able to establish yourself in the school as having expert power, having human resource and connection power, having the ability to understand the political realities in the building, as well as the ability to create a vision for people around you, those are really important for, I think, doing this anti-racist work in schools. It really does depend on how much, how you've deliberately created that sphere of influence that we need in order to be effective as a school counselor. So it ratchets that up significantly when it's around social justice and when it's around making sure that those conversations about our students are always respectful and always empowering, and reminding others, because people want to, oh, I was just making a joke, those kinds of things. And recognizing that, no, this is not a joking matter. This is not something that we're going to laugh at. How are we doing on time? I know that there was something you wanted to also, how are we on time? Sorry. I get excited and then I don't want to stop. So I'm trying to be very thoughtful about your time and the people who are on the webinar and not go over.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Laura has been vigilant, and I appreciate her work of posting the website for more information, as well as the link to complete the survey. You will receive a free 1-hour CE certificate through NBCC, who are accredited with, by completing that survey. So if you want to go ahead and click that link. I do want to ask one more question, Dr. Dollarhide. Given the poll that we took earlier, about 50% of our folks on the call with us today are students.
Mhm.
And so I'm wondering what advice you would give to folks who probably feel a little bit powerless
Mhm.
and just getting started. What is the first step? How do you find mentors? How do you find support and people who are thinking like you?
Having a like-minded community is really important for your social justice identity development. And so it is important to find mentors and to find individuals who understand, anti-racism and are going to be able to give you support in that. I know CSJ has a mentoring program that will provide you a connection with a mentor. I know that there are also ways to find like-minded individuals in other social justice organizations in terms of a state association, a campus organization. There may also be community organizations. If you've been a part of any of the protests or any of the marches and that kind of thing, you may be able to connect with other individuals through that venue also. One of the things that I think is really exciting is that a number of at least in a number of the communities that I've been a part of, our Black colleagues, professional colleagues, pastors, ministers, and other individuals in the business community or who share African American identity, those individuals have been really stepping up and saying, I want to be connected, I want to help. And I think that, being able to connect with those organizations in the community can also provide you with kind of that foundation for feeling that you're being able to move forward in a meaningful way in your own social justice identity development, even if you're not able to act on it in the disempowered role of intern or student. Because I know that is a difficult and very powerless role.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dollarhide, for being with us tonight. Again, this will all be available on our website and through our YouTube channel. Go ahead and complete that survey. Laura just sent it out again for everyone. We are so grateful for your willingness to fight the fight and to be brave and to take risks in all of the places where you are serving. So thank you for being brave. Thank you, students, for joining. You are our current and you are our future. So please don't give up and don't be afraid to step out and take the leap of advocacy. Look forward to our webinar series for the fall coming up. We'll hopefully have that up soon for you. And again, thanks for being with us tonight. If you'd like to go ahead and